Welcome. Kent Bain here with 9 Business Group and Action Coach. Going to spend a few quality minutes with a friend, Randy McCord with National Best Financial Network. Randy, welcome. We have 6 or 7 questions we'd like to ask you, but before we get into that, why don't you give us a quick background on your business, who you are, and let's pay homage to our friends in BNI. What's a good referral for you?
Well, a good referral for me is an incorporated successful business owner, typically with a revenue of around $1 million a year at a minimum, and up from there. And if they have some employees, so much the better. But those are the kinds of clients that I can really provide some excellent support and strategies to.
Excellent. So is the support and strategies more about group insurance or widely held? Is it more kind of life insurance and financial advising piece, or is it a group insurance? So just maybe narrow it down for us.
Well, it's a combination. Our industry, of course, provides protection products for business owners. So that would include things like disability insurance, life insurance, critical illness insurance. And on the employee side, of course, group benefits, group retirement plans, all of the usual suspects. But in my practice, what I focus on is showing business owners how they can leverage life insurance to create tax-efficient strategies for their retained earnings. That's my real superpower. That's what I focus on, and what I've got a lot of acumen in is showing them how to do that. In other words, how can you tax shelter your earnings in your corporation, keep CRA away from them, and then be able to produce some form of tax-free retirement income when you're finished with your business. So that's really what I focus on.
So it's one thing to have a business that generates profit, but really you're in the business of working with people who are generating profit, and then how do we protect as much of that profit as possible, then shelter it into for all intents and purposes, a personally directed retirement savings plan where you can keep it, maximize the return on that investment.
Excuse me, sorry. I don't really dwell on return on investment because it's a more complex strategy than that. If they just said to me, "Oh, what's the return on investment?" I would have to say to them, "Well, it depends on when in the process we're doing an analysis, right?" I mean, when you buy a life insurance policy in the beginning, you're paying mostly for the protection, and the accumulation of cash accrues over time. So eventually, the return on investment is most significant at the end when you're ready to retire. But if they ask me, well, what can I expect for a return on investment? Well, I can go, if you want to remove the cost of insurance and you want to look at it 25 years down the road, yeah, probably between 3.5% to 5.5% rate of return. And they just go, well, that's not very good. And I go, well, yeah, but remember, the strategy is to make use of this cash on a tax-free basis. So now let's add the cost of tax to that return. Now let's see what that return is, and it will beat the return on a typical balanced mutual fund over 25 years that is taxed inside the corporation. And that's the strategy. That's what we're trying to achieve. Not only the protection, but the tax sheltering, and eventually the tax-free leverage that we use to get that retirement income. So that's how I always explain it. Because I believe me, Kent, I get that question all the time. What's the rate of return? And so I have to go through the whole program with them to show them that really that's not what you should be concerned about, especially not in the beginning.
Great clarification. And that's kind of, I probably misspoke a little bit with return on investment. It's more kind of basically, as a business owner and my clients, what we care about is when we generate profit in our businesses, we want as much of that for ourselves, both today and long term. So how do we protect that asset and then create wealth and use it for lifestyle well in the future? A friend of mine shared it with me, and I love this philosophy. which is simple. Businesses are a vehicle. They're a vehicle to create a lifestyle of our choosing and our want. And so how do we put things like the tools you have in place to protect those vehicles and assets to have the choice we want? Because really, business is fun. It can make heroes out of us or zeros out of us. We just get to choose the path and then figure out the journey. And so thank you for joining us today. So we've got a couple questions for you. Did COVID impact your business? And if so, how? Or what was the biggest impact if there was a major impact of COVID?
That's a great question. When COVID occurred back in early 2020, the concern for most industries was how can they maintain clientele and how can they maintain operations. And the life insurance industry was beginning to digitize. It was starting to move to a much more technological based transaction process, but it was slow. I don't know if you know our industry very well, Kent, but life insurance companies aren't in the habit of changing anything quickly, and it's a slow process. And it's just the nature of what we do. It's they're very conservative by nature. Their job is to provide protection to families and business owners. So, they're not out to try and reinvent the wheel in any given year. But there was this move toward, for instance, online applications where you no longer had to meet the client face to face to be able to process a transaction. And some companies had been, either experimenting with it or had transferred their processes to this. I will tell you this though: a lot of the advisors were not picking up on it, especially the fellows who'd been doing paper apps for 20 years or 25 years and who weren't so tech savvy. They weren't really keen on this online sort of situation. Of course, with COVID, it became a necessity. So now they were stuck with not being able to do a paper application. They couldn't meet the client face to face. Now, we were an essential service. So the truth is we could meet the client face to face, but it wasn't recommended. What it did is it forced all of the carriers to step up to the plate technologically instantaneously. Changes that we were told would take 6 months, 10 months, a year, happened in 30 days. I will say I've never seen an industry move more quickly to maintain their transactional ability than our industry. And virtually every carrier that we deal with, and I'm contracted to over 16 life insurance companies, virtually every carrier transitioned to an online non-face-to-face application. And very quickly, some of them even, within the space of a few months, provided digital delivery. So literally, there was no need to actually meet with the client in person to do the application and the interview. And the other thing that it did, which hasn't gone away, is it expanded the breadth of underwriting. And what I mean by that is, as you know, when you get life insurance, it relates to your smoking status, your sex, or your gender, and your health. And so if you're applying for a certain amount of life insurance and you're a certain age, it very well could be the case that the insurance company will want to do a medical. So they'll send a nurse to your home and take your blood pressure and do vitals and make you pee in a cup and, take a blood sample and all that good stuff. Well, to give you an example, a typical paramedical would be required for anyone 45 years old who's applying for $500,000 of life insurance or more. That was typical pre-COVID. Right now, the standard is 55 years old for $1 million of coverage.
Well, that's a significant change across the board.
A very significant change. And that had a lot to do with the insurance companies going to the industry, because even the insurance companies share risk with companies that are called reinsurers. Okay.
Sure.
So the
Yep.
insurance companies have reinsurers that help them spread the risk that allow us to provide, cost-effective products. And so everybody sort of stepped up to the plate and said, okay, well, let's get electronic. Let's make sure we can do our business without having to meet clients, and let's make sure we can deliver policies to them without having to touch them. And let's make sure that we can expand our underwriting so we can get more people covered without having to send in a nurse and do a paramedical. And that made some extremely significant changes to the industry, both in efficiency and in the scope to which we could provide better and quicker services. And that hasn't gone away yet. They haven't reversed any of those underwriting parameters. In fact, some of them are even expanding out further. I hear talk now of $2 million policies for 55-year-olds with no underwrite, with no necessary.
Now's the time to stock up.
Well, I'm not saying that necessarily. I just think that, again, when there are times when you're pressed in your business for whatever reason, you tend to get a lot more creative and try to find solutions. And that's exactly what the industry did. So sort of a long-winded explanation, but it didn't. Personally, I had my best year in 2020. Best year. I probably have 24 clients I've never met in person. I plan to someday. I do want to meet them, but when we did business, we did not have to meet.
That is amazing, and the reason I say that is, your industry typically is a very high trust industry where you need to spend some time to gain the credibility, have some visibility to earn the trust of a client. So to be able to do that and never meet them face to face, whether it be phone or video only, is pretty impressive. And I think it speaks a lot to just the shifting of the general population and maybe their trust level shifting a little bit as to what is a trust. And I think probably even your social media platform, who you are as a person, how you run your business speaks to the volume. So I would assume then that your clients are putting more trust, not necessarily in meeting you, but in referrals and in your reputation and the length of being around. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption. Most of my business comes through referral anyway. So you're correct. It's a high trust business, and it's a lot easier typically, I think, to sort of engender trust in person. The reason is it's a lot easier to read body language. You get a full picture of the person. You get a vibe, you get a feel from somebody when you meet them in person. That's a lot harder to get, in this format, for example. So one of the things I found myself doing was getting much better at looking carefully at details on a screen, to read body language and attitude and see how folks were being affected by information I was providing them. So I don't know if I've gotten any better at it, but I'm certainly a lot better at looking at a screen and being more engaged with somebody's image at the other end. But I got to tell you though, I've been seeing clients in person the last few weeks, of course, and it's a refreshing change for sure.
Glad to hear it. It's definitely for me as well. Definitely seeing a lot more willingness from folks to get out and about, socialize, gets part of their. I mean, we are social beings after all. Changing direction slightly away from a pandemic and COVID, what has been the biggest learning since you've been a business owner? If you take one nugget out of your years being a business owner, what would that nugget be that you'd share that I want my people after me to know this thing and learn it? What would it be?
I think from a business standpoint, it's the amount of time that it takes to become established in business and to produce a living income. It's our industry, many of the recruiting type companies paint a pretty rosy picture, which is the want of any company trying to recruit somebody. And I think that I didn't go into it, with rose-colored glasses, and I did expect there was going to be some period of time where I was depending on some net worth and my wife's income to carry me through. That actually took a lot longer than I thought. And to build my business took a lot more effort and a lot more focus than I thought it would. And that, I think, is something I tell every single advisor that I bump into who's a new fellow or new person who's joining the industry, is that you have to expect that it's going to be a while before you've developed enough of a clientele to be able to support your lifestyle. So you should be prepared, to be able to subsidize your business for a few years. I don't think that's much different from other entrepreneurs either. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs start out with borrowed money, and they have a lot of struggles to try and get their business to profitability. And we know that the failure rate for new businesses is relatively high. And so that's something I think people have to take into consideration. It may take a little longer than you think, and it may be a little more work than you thought it might be.
Absolutely, no, for sure. What would be 2 to 3 things that you would do different or not do? Looking back to the resume of time, effort, activity, what would be the two or three things you'd go, shouldn't have done that?
Oh, from a major business standpoint, I think one of the things that I would do differently is I would have researched the industry a lot more carefully when I first entered. So when you're starting a business, as an example, I did not do a tremendous amount of research into the financial services or the life insurance industry. I've been around a long time. I thought I kind of knew what it was. Gee whiz, you're selling protection products and you're selling some investment products. And I got recruited by one of those recruiting type companies. So, again, it was a rosy picture. And the industry allows for part-time licensees today. They did not, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But because they were struggling to get new people involved, can we pause here, Kent? I got somebody at the front door. There's nobody home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right. So just in summary, then what you're saying is the top 3 do's or don't do's is basically more research and be a little more prepared before jumping in with both feet.
Yeah, I think the research end of it, as I say, once I finally figured out how the industry really worked and some more of the truths of the industry, and not so much the glossy picture that was being painted by the company who recruited us, I think I would have advanced more quickly in my career. Let me put it this way, I probably would have saved 3 years worth of working time, and gone directly.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah, that is a lot. Although that was part-time, though, I will give it that. But I would have much more quickly, I think, been able to transition into the independent side of the business that I'm in now, because I would have understood it, I would have been able to make an assessment, and then I could have made a good business decision.
Excellent. Okay. So was that the biggest mistake you made, or is there one other large learning you had along the way that was quote unquote a course correction, or that made a substantial change in the direction of your business?
Oh, the other thing that I think is important is to set up systems ahead of time. Don't wait until you need the systems to set them up, is what I would recommend, because when you're setting up systems after you finally realize, oh my God, I have too many clients, I have too much data, I have too much information, I need to get control of this stuff. By that time, you're working doubly hard to set those systems and those kinds of automations up, that kind of systemized approach to your business. I would plan that ahead of time. I would sort of assume that I had 500 clients, right? Even when I only had 3. That's what I would recommend to somebody. think about having 500 clients, because someday you will, and it's a lot harder to manage that um, if you haven't put proper systems in place.
So as a generalized business principle, then if I can paraphrase a little bit, it's really about start with the end in mind, figure out what the ideal business looks like for the individual entrepreneur, the business, figure out what's going to be required, and then kind of work backwards, whether it be a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, 1-year plan, to bring it back today and say, yeah, I'm going to need to be able to support X number of clients, 500 clients in your case. So I probably need to start building into that. That's great learning. Thank you for sharing that. What would be the 2 or 3 things that you would absolutely do again that were maybe a bit non-normal, or things that really led to your success that you doubled down on, if you will, is like absolutely across the board, 2 or 3 things that every business owner, entrepreneur should do?
Well, I think 2 things that I think I would do exactly the same is to make sure that I had good mentorship and good partnership in my business. Trust my partners and lean more on experiences of the advisors who were experienced, or had been in the business longer and knew more. Right? Lean on those folks, because there's so much to know in our industry that if you don't have some help and support, you can get drowned in information, product strategies pretty quickly. And the other thing is to try and specialize early. It's okay in the beginning to try and learn all of the products and have a broad range of understanding and pick up clients hither and yon, but to really be successful in the business, you need to specialize, become really good at a part of it, because the life insurance industry is a very broad industry. I mean, we're one of the financial pillars of financial services in Canada, and for good reason, because we provide everything from investments to annuities to protection products to group plans. It's a broad industry, and specialize early. I tried to do that, and I have done that, and that's gone a long way to helping me focus more and serve my clients better, I think. And so have associations and colleagues who you can send business to, because that's their specialty. That's the best kind of relationship to have. I always think in this industry, it's weird to think about competition, because we're all trying to serve the client the same way, in the best way that we can. Well, for the most part, most advisors would agree with that. And the idea is that if I can't do it well enough, well, then why wouldn't I bring you in to do it? And then it's easy in our industry to share compensation. It's written right on the applications, right on a life insurance application. You can say, is this a shared compensation? Oh, if so, what's the guy's contract number, and how much do you want to share? And it's assumed that is a natural process in our industry.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So one last question then. In the last 2 to 3 years of being in business, COVID, all that stuff set aside, more along the lines of success story, has there been a business or a business you've done business with that has impressed you or wowed you? And what impressed you about it?
Well, there are a couple of businesses that I thought were just really quite interesting. I'm always interested by tech businesses, technology companies. I think that's really the way of the future for Alberta. I think we can be a technological powerhouse in Canada. I think we have that capability. And obviously, as much as I'm an Albertan, born and raised, and worked the oil rigs when I was a kid, and I'm not happy about a lot of the federal policies regarding Alberta. I think that we, as an entrepreneurial culture, are just perfectly poised for technological advances. And I've seen some companies here do some really interesting technology, whether it be manufacturing chipsets that are just very unique. I thought that was kind of interesting. The other thing that I think are just the variety of businesses. I have a client who runs a business that fixes windows. When you get the double pane modern windows that get a little crack in them and then they get condensation inside. Well, they actually repair that. I mean, who would have thought? You don't have to replace your whole window. Things like that. I have one client who is runs an LED lighting shop, and I hate to use the word pivot because it's such an overused word. So I like to say sachet. You know, he sashayed into cannabis growth. You know, selling for cannabis growers, and that led him to the greenhouse industry as a whole, which is becoming a booming industry in Alberta. And so I just like the way that entrepreneurs kind of, you know, take their vision, build a business, and through all of the challenges, of which there are many, manage to succeed and manage to, you know, do a great job. I just get excited when I talk to business owners. It really makes me feel like there's hope and optimism in the world, you know?
I'm with you. In doing these success interviews, that's the reason I keep doing it, is our world gets better with the raw entrepreneurial spirit, the creativity of entrepreneurs, the problems that our clients, that your clients, that entrepreneurs solve in the world are amazing. And that's probably the number reason why I do this, is those stories have to be shared wide and strong. So that being said, would you recommend one or two of those three people to jump on and do a similar interview with us? And would you
Oh yeah,
make that
absolutely.
introduction?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a couple of clients I think that that would be. I think they would enjoy it. I think it would be appropriate. I think they would have good insights to share, and you know, some good experiences. So,
Excellent.
do you were talking about? I know you asked the question related to challenges, right? And there's a group I met at a networking event earlier this week, and it's a legal team. They have a law office here in Calgary, but the one of the partners, she heads up a group in Calgary of high tech and entrepreneurial like startups, and they talk about it's. I don't really want to say this. You can edit it out, but it's the F Up Club, and it's like a mentorship or a mastermind group where basically the executives of these companies comes and they lay out like the worst mistake they made and let everybody know, here's the worst mistake I made in my business. And I thought that was very refreshing because, you know, people tend to talk a lot about successes. You know, entrepreneurs are they're kind of like gamblers. They're like always optimistic that, you know, they're going to win. They're going to hit the home run. They're going to, you know, yeah, we're going to hit dealt aces. And so they don't tend usually to dwell on the negative. So it's nice to be able to have a sort of a mentorship group where, you know, people will be vulnerable enough to open up and say, hey, here's how I really blew it. So I'm going to chat with her about that and see what it takes to be a member.
That'd be awesome. Now it sounds like a lot of fun. So good for you. Any parting comments you want to leave with us before we sign off?
No, I really want to thank you very much for this opportunity and for reaching out to me. I'm pretty skeptical a lot when I get solicited on LinkedIn. A lot of times it's marketing guys trying to sell me a marketing plan, and not that I'm not interested or that I don't talk to them, but you know, yours was a breath of fresh air when you said, hey, no, let's just do an interview. And so I thought, yeah, that's really cool. I like that. And so I really appreciate it. Yeah, getting the message out regarding life insurance as something that can be of value and can create value to business owners. That's the message I keep trying to get out day after day and week after week. Don't be scared off because of the term. You know, that's what I try to tell business owners.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time, Randy. Have an amazing week, and we'll be in touch in the following weeks. And we would be extremely grateful if you cared to make a few introductions for us so we can continue to interview and talk to other successful people, and also, yes, help them share their challenges, because yes, we all face challenges in growing businesses, and sharing those are part of the journey too. So it also gives some reassurance to those business owners who are facing a challenge that they too can be overcome.
Yeah. Thanks once again, Kent, and have a great week.
Welcome.